everybody, and welcome back. Yes, back. Hopefully you're back. You saw our first episode to the Self-Care Sunday podcast. We are your hosts, Shannon and Kyle, and if you haven't met us yet, then that means you have not heard our first episode. We definitely recommend checking out our first episode about homesickness and adjustment. Even if you feel perfectly adjusted, there's always room for improvement in everything we do.
Yes, you should definitely listen to our first episode. We were really excited and nervous about it, so it's a great first experience for you. But just as a disclaimer, this podcast is not intended to be used in place of therapy. If any of the activities or information elicit a strong emotional response, just know that there are services available to you. You can speak with a counselor on campus, reach out to any kind of other service providers that would be helpful for you, whether that's in your local area or campus connected.
Absolutely. Do not be afraid to ask for help, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So welcome to episode 2. Today, we are talking about work-life balance. So, what is work-life balance? Well, it's a lie. Work-life balance is not real. How can it be real when it implies that you're perfectly balancing each and every facet of your life all at the same time, constantly? That does not sound possible. And it's not. So our first step in understanding work-life balance is to come to terms with this fact. It is not real. There is no possible way for you to always have your life together. But you know what? That's okay, because we're not meant to be perfect.
That's right. I feel like it's not about perfection. The balancing part of it is that it's constantly in flux. Sometimes we are working a lot more. Sometimes we're relaxing a lot more. Finding something that works for us is really important. I think during this COVID time, a lot of people have been exploring what productivity means to them in their lives, because I think for a lot of people who are engaged either in schoolwork, you have jobs, a big part of our identity becomes what we do. And that sometimes becomes problematic if you are just defined by the things you are doing, the work you are accomplishing, achieving. Sometimes it leaves us feeling a loss of sense of self if we're not able to do the same thing. So when you feel a sense of self-worth and identity around that, and then all of a sudden you're not able to do it, whether you're overwhelmed, you're stressed, you just need a break, sometimes it makes us feel worse because we're not being productive. So that idea of not being productive, and you can't see me, but I'm using quotes, air quotes, not being productive. I think that really impacts like how we think of ourselves, and then how we can take steps forward to finding out who we are beyond our productivity, because we are not just what we do. Ideally, we have some sense of like a work-life balance. It's constantly in flux, it's constantly shifting. But know that you have a certain number of responsibilities that you might need to accomplish. And then outside of those responsibilities is a huge part of who you are. That is really important to explore and figure out, because then it feels a little less overwhelming when you're burnt out, when you're overworking yourself. Um, I don't know if you can relate to this, Shannon, but I definitely can. A lot of who I am has oftentimes been found with the things that I'm doing, keeping myself busy, keeping myself working. The harder times are when I'm just resting, and that feels anxiety provoking.
I'm sorry. Did you just describe me? Exactly. Yep. I think I really like what you said too. You are not what you do. I think that's wonderful, because oftentimes people might introduce themselves as like, hey, I'm Jessica, I'm an accountant. Like, okay, sure. That's what you do, but that's like not everything you are. So a lot of our identity is tied directly to our work, and that's kind of a result of socialization and what we're taught to expect of ourselves and what other people expect of us. A lot of people grow up from a young age experiencing a lot of pressure from their family systems or guardians, like, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer. Like, okay, but can I also like be an emotional human being with thoughts and feelings?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of
True.
external pressure and internal pressure that we didn't even ask for. Rude.
Sorting through that is really important. We didn't ask for it. Now we have to make sense of it.
Yeah. So now what do we do with that? We're stuck with it. And now we're in this balancing act sometimes we're able to balance everything well, and sometimes the balance shifts to more of one thing or the other. College students, especially, often juggle classwork, having a job, playing a sport, being a student leader, clubs and organizations, social life, home life. My goodness, I got exhausted just reading that and just kind of reliving it, thinking about it. College is a great experience, but also probably one of the most harrowing experiences on your mental health. It's so wild. There's so much going on. You're trying to develop yourself as a professional while still trying to fully develop your frontal lobe. It's not even done yet, usually for traditional age college students.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just, man, I'm
Yeah,
exhausted
done.
thinking about it.
I know. I think of how many roles or responsibilities college students do take on, and honestly, it's like some of that comes from that drive to have this like resume building experience, right? Like take on all the things, do as much as you can to prove
Yeah.
you're worthy of a job in the future. And I think like that becomes very overwhelming when you're not sure where the cutoff point is. When can I just take time to reflect on who I am or relax or have downtime or friend time?
Yeah.
And a lot of who we are becomes the things that we're involved in, the things that we do.
I think that's also a great way to look at it. And like thinking of burnout in general, a lot of people are unhappy in the workforce, and that's likely because they've been forced into this one singular role without being able to fully expand on the very facets of their being.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. Yes. Because then, if, as soon as something doesn't go well in that one facet of your life, it feels like everything is affected. And I think that really shows us how much we are investing in those responsibilities, but how much we're kind of like lacking in our personal identity as well. And I think,
Yeah.
especially for understanding, I know you brought up burnout. Some of like the warning signs for just understanding that you're getting to this place of not feeling a sense of balance or grounded in your identity and your work and life balance would be feeling overwhelmed, anxious, discouraged. I know people that are staying up so late to get work done, so they're not able to sleep, they're not able to relax or rest. And even when they have time to just like take a break, and then they feel guilty, like, oh, I should be doing this other stuff. I should be getting homework done. I should be studying for this
Mm.
test. Um, the endless to-do list of responsibilities. So
Oh,
all
those
of those
sheets.
feelings, yes, yeah, you can relate. Not a fun experience when your to-do list. I mean, I think I've heard a lot of people say this from high school to college. High school had kind of a finite to-do list. You had your homework to do, so you did it, and then it was done, and you could be done for the night, whatever. You had time for yourself. When you come to college, there is so much more that you have to keep track of. And then I feel like when you're adjusting to that endless to-do list, how do you move from I've done enough because my to-do list is cleared off to I've done as much as I can do for my own mental health and well-being. So the rest of it can wait until I take care of myself. Because I think that's a hard, tricky part.
Yeah, I think that's probably a point that we could have spoken about last week, or I always say week, but last
Mhm.
episode, um, we talked about adjustment, and that transition from high school to college is really a whirlwind for some people. I know for me, I was a good student in high school. I didn't have to do a lot, but I did everything I had to do, and I got really good grades. And then I got to college, and I was like, "What? What's happening?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I? What do I have to do? I have to go to these like presentations, and I was so lost, and I was that's when I like reflecting on it, I can really think about my work life balance or school life balance was not good because everything was going wrong. It felt like because school was something that was giving me trouble and it had never given me trouble before. And that's really all I had focused on.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, it feels very different for like who you've always known yourself to be. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, all right, I have to rethink this.
Yeah, that's why I think earlier you said something about when things go wrong in your work aspect of your life, it feels like everything's going wrong. And I think that's why it's so important to build that personal foundation. It's not like a plan B, but it is what you can fall back on. You fall back on your interests, your hobbies, you fall back on other things that you enjoy when work kind of doesn't really go as planned. Maybe you have to get laid off, maybe something goes wrong. I know a lot of people were out of work because of the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
so it was
Yeah.
really nice to see people like engaging in different interests that they did have and exploring those different interests. Um, and I think that is a good example of why it's so important.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I think even on a professional level too, just people around campus and like staff and faculty that have a hard time like not checking their email at midnight when maybe it's not a good time to be doing work. I feel like it
Yeah,
shows that there's this level of connection to that identity. But beyond that, so like you use the example, if someone gets laid off, what's there to fall back on? And if your whole identity is wrapped up in those responsibilities, that's going to hit really hard. So for people who have support or have a sense of self, like I am not my work, I think it makes it a little bit easier for us to be like, okay, I'm doing a job, I'm doing classes, I'm doing school, but there's way more to me than just that.
exactly. There's way more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So far we've talked about constantly balancing just a myriad of responsibilities on what can sometimes feel like a tightrope. How can we lighten that load? I think this is a very crucial part of work life balance, one that I'm still working on myself. I think everyone kind of works on being able to say no when people ask for help, or people ask you to do something extra. And there's like this pull to say, yes, of course. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I'll help you. And I feel like there's a weird narrative around being a yes person. Like it's typically called a yes man, but a yes person. And there's a negative connotation with saying no, but it's okay to say no. It's hard, but you really need to take into consideration what you have to do, what you're already balancing, juggling, etc. And saying no is not a bad thing. Um, Something I learned when I was really struggling with saying no to extra tasks was someone taught me the yes but or the no but
Mm-hmm.
approach. So you could say no, but I could do this if you really want to try to do something for somebody who asks. And maybe you could feasibly do it in about a week or so. You can say no, but I could help you out next week, or no, but I know someone who could help you. So
Mm-hmm.
offering alternatives and not just saying no flat out is a good way around this guilt.
Mm-hmm. Sure, because then I think the scary part of saying no is that you're going to disappoint someone or that they're going to be upset that you can't help them. Um, I like that strategy though of saying, okay, yeah, I have to say no. There are other things I have to offer. So that could be resources, that could be redirecting someone, that could be setting a different timeline. But sometimes we can't work on maybe someone else's set timeline, but we could do it in 3 weeks. So all of those kind of other options to alleviate some of that sense of I said no and now I feel like a jerk because you're not. You also have priorities.
Yeah. I think I like how you said you can't work on someone else's timeline. That's perfect. As we've seen a lot now in our current social media, pop culture, there's those discussions around manifestation and creating your own reality. And you really do create your own reality. So your reality and your timeline could be vastly different from someone else's. And that's when deadlines come in and they have their driving forces, and to ask you to incorporate your own stuff into their timeline is a big ask. And I think we really downplay that. If someone asks you to do something, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, thanks for asking for help. I'm like glad that they asked me. But there's also just a big sense of responsibility that you would be taking on, and I don't think that people really focus on that.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah. I feel like in an ideal world where I'm sitting here casually twiddling my thumbs and someone is like, hey, I have something that you could help me with. Yeah, of course. But that's not this reality. This
No.
reality is we all have our things, whether that's like our work stuff, our own responsibilities, whether that's like our personal life stuff, the things that we deal with at home and in our families and friends and the world. I mean, there's just a lot that our timelines are made of. So, like you said, someone asking, can you fit this into your timeline? Um, I think that is something that we need to also be good about setting our boundaries with and saying, like, no, I can't do that, but I can do it, whatever.
I think also sometimes twiddling our thumbs is one of our things that we have to do.
Mm, good reframe.
Yeah.
I
And
like it.
that's on self-care and relaxing.
Yes. So maybe the twiddling your thumbs is what you need. And that is perfectly okay to say yes to.
Yes.
Hmm.
So, some changes right now. A lot of students have to do homework in their rooms or at their homes, and they can't go to the library, home, and even sometimes jobs are happening in similar spaces. We did talk about email communication and boundaries. So, what I've done personally, I would be that person on checking my email at midnight. um,
Mhm.
and then I realized this is not healthy. This is not what I want to be doing at midnight. So, I set a boundary and I don't check my email after 5 p.m. And then I always am upfront about that with my staff members and I let them know if it's an emergency, contact me like via the direct messaging system we have, or give me a call if it's an absolute emergency. But other than that, I'll get back to you tomorrow. And that felt weird for me to say. And it even got a little bit of an interesting response at first because I think people are not used to others setting boundaries, but it's worked out really well so far. And I have really enjoyed not checking my email late at night.
Mhm.
And
Great.
then also there's that increased screen time. So right now I'm even noticing my eyes are like, ah! So I'm gonna
Mhm.
put on my blue light blocking glasses. This
Nice.
is not an advertisement, but it is a recommendation.
Not sponsored, but we both have them. Yeah, so I mean, I can relate so much to that. I think it's hard when we're watching other people who are so accommodating or so people pleasing that they take on that responsibility to feel like you're the one who is saying, no, I have to set a boundary here. Sometimes that's really intimidating to feel like that is like you have to lead in that position. But I do think like people benefit from feeling that sense because it helps them also feel like they can say no to things, or they can not check their emails late at night, or they can take time away from doing work and productivity. And especially with the increased screen time, I think probably the less we are checking things on screens, probably the better.
Hmm.
As hard as that is during this COVID time. But yeah, so I mean, so much of that resonated with me, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about our personal experiences. But for me, I the best advice that I got coming to college was someone was like, think of college as a job with set hours. So outside of those hours, you can go do whatever you need to do, whether that's just like hang out with friends, play games, relax, whatever. But if you think of it in those terms, then I think you start to set better boundaries for yourself. And I tried really hard to limit what I was doing on the weekend. So reserving some time on Sunday to study for like an exam on Monday is okay. I think there are those kind of like flexible moments where, yeah, we're just preparing for something. But if you are spending your entire weekend doing work and you're not able to relax at all, I think it becomes more of a burnout situation. You don't get the chance to just relax, connect with people, find support, find things you enjoy. And so much of college is really that self-exploration where we kind of have to figure ourselves out. And if we're just invested in the work we're doing, I think it becomes a little bit more challenging to do that. So I knew it was good for me to have time away from that. Sports were really helpful. I just played, softball with friends, and that was a really nice way to just check out, not focus or be productive, be silly. There was no stake in that. So I found that really helpful. And just prioritizing, like what is the most important, what can wait, because not everything has to happen immediately. Um, and I think we were talking about this before with all the responsibilities you can take on campus and clubs and organizations and being an RA, and there's endless opportunities. So how can we choose what is the most important to us? And sometimes it's connecting it to our goals and what we hope to take from it. So being able to say no to opportunities might not feel good in the moment because it's saying no to something that could lead to something, but saying yes to everything just leaves us swamped, overwhelmed, and yeah, burnt. So we need our healing time.
Yes. And I think something good to point out, you said it's okay to set aside some time on Sunday to study for an exam on Monday. And then keep track of that. Keep track of the
Mm-hmm.
extra work that you do, and then make an effort to take that amount of time. Say you do 3 hours of extra work in a few days, then take a day to do 3 hours extra of self-care and
Mm-hmm.
really just give that time back to yourself because it's your time. You're
Yeah.
giving it up to do something or to accomplish something, and it has to come back to you some way.
Yes, yes, well said. Because yes, being flexible means also making the time somewhere else. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, talking about personal experiences, oh boy, even just thinking about how busy I am makes me tired. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm constantly doing something, whether that's for work, school, a club, etc. It also really doesn't help that I'm a Virgo. So, for all my astrology lovers, I'm very prone to perfectionism. I've gotten better, but there is still part of me that's like, okay, let me look at all the little tiny details and make sure everything's perfect. So this isn't meant to be a flex. However, a few different times in my life, people have told me they can't imagine doing what I do, and they're proud of me or amazed at the things that I accomplish, etc. Kind of like hyping me up, and they were being supportive, but I felt angry internally as a response to this. And it happened a few different times, and I was like, why do I just feel so mad? um, and this actually happened about a week ago when one of my friends said something very similar to me, and I was just so confused about my anger. Being busy all the time is the worst, though, and I have a tendency to get lost in what I'm doing. By the time I come out on the other side, I sometimes feel like it was all a dream. So I felt this anger, not toward my friend, not toward the others who have told me this before, but toward myself. After taking a moment to reflect and journal about it, I came to the realization that on one hand, I was also proud of myself. Part of me is able to recognize my effort and hard work, and that has taken me a really long time to achieve. But the other part of me, that used to be the predominant part of me, isn't exactly satisfied with the quality of work I do. Some things may not always be up to my standards, or I might not complete assignments as early as I would have liked to. And there's just such a clash inside of my brain. um, a lot of cognitive dissonance up here. I think that this experience is a direct reflection of the dichotomy between work and life. I think
Mhm.
there are some expectations, like we spoke about earlier, that were given to you, and you internalize them, but they're not yours, they're someone else's. So those are the expectations, and that's the part of me that is the critic. And then the other part of me is like waving a little white flag, like, woo, you did it. It's good. Leave me alone, mean critic. Let me feel accomplished. I'm currently in the midst of a different skewed version of my work-life balance. I have a big exam coming up, so that takes precedent over some of the other things, and that's okay. But still, my critic is like, you should be doing a better job, or you should
Mm,
this, blah, blah, blah. Well, you should shut up.
mm. Oh yes, that inner critic. I think we all have that struggle at different times, and maybe what it sounds like is different. But I like what you kind of brought into this, though, is like those cultural stories that were told about being productive and saying yes to everything and taking on everything. Because I mean, sometimes like our feedback is really positive, right? Like someone saying like, "Oh, I can't imagine like doing all that you're doing. Like that's really great that you're able to accomplish so much." But at the same time, it isn't such a feat all the time. Sometimes it's coming from a place of, yeah, but I'm not taking care of myself. So is it really that great? Um, and I think we can all get consumed with that. I know, especially with the external validation piece, right? Like seeking approval from other people and someone saying like, yeah, you did really great. So there's that aspect of it. But I love that you also tied in your internal workings as well. Is it up to a certain standard? Is that your standard or is that somebody else's standard? Or is that a fear? There's just so many things that kind of drive what we do and how we do it. But I think that is important to acknowledge some of those things that have been internalized um, in this society. That is very much about your work and how productive you can be. Um, but prioritizing your mental health and maybe just giving yourself the benefit of the doubt that you are a person and deserve some downtime. That's
Yep.
also important.
Always remember you're a person.
Yeah, you are not a machine. So we had some ideas on how to cope with some of these overwhelming feelings, not feeling good enough, perfectionism, productivity, all that stuff. I found it really helpful to have at least some kind of routine before and after work. So knowing in the mornings before I start my day, I can give myself some time to just sit, drink some tea, watch something that I really enjoy, feel good going into that. When I'm at work, I do my work. That's what I do. That's what I'm here for. That's what I get paid for. When you transition out of work, I also think it's helpful to have something that helps you with that transition, something to let go of the responsibility and become the person you are because you are not doing your job anymore. Yes, there are those emergency situations that Shannon mentioned, things that you can be contacted about when you need to. Um, but how can you make sure that you have something tangible to acknowledge internally that you're doing something different? I've known people that they have like some kind of like symbolic act, right? Like you turn off your computer, you walk away from it, and that's done for the day. Um, Something like shutting off the lights in your office, like those kind of things, even if it's the same space, have the symbolic act, something tangible to do to signal to your brain, done with this, on to the next thing. I'm a big fan of just going for a walk. I finish work, I go for a walk, I'm physically out of my place. I am somewhere else. And when I come back to it, it is a different space for me. So I found that those kind of routines can be really helpful in making that work.
It can even be done during the workday. I know for anyone who is listening who works with students, who is interested in counseling, who is a counselor, we're taught in counseling programs that after you work with a client, it's important to have some kind of ritual that you do with yourself to kind of clear your own energy and clear out the energy of the client you just worked with, whether that's taking a deep breath, doing some sound cleansing in your office. So any student affairs professionals, maybe you have to do a lot of conduct. I know my coworker has been doing a lot of conduct lately, and that's no fun. So um, something I would recommend to anyone who's constantly on the go and on to the next thing, like Kyle said, would be to just take a moment and find something small you can do in between the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. Oh, I love those little, and it doesn't have to be some grand gesture, right? Like literally just sitting back in your chair, closing your eyes, taking a few deep breaths, just to let that clearing out happen.
Let that shit go.
Yeah.
Another way to do some coping is the one thing routine. So, finding a small thing you can do for yourself every day and make that part of your work life balance efforts. So, maybe, like Kyle mentioned, having tea. I feel like Kyle and I are creepily similar because I also like tea. And that was my one thing recently, to incorporate having a specific cup of tea every morning. And then once that became sort of second nature to me, I started to add other little things. So after you've successfully incorporated one thing and it feels almost unnatural to skip doing it, then you can add another thing and keep going. And then also, hopefully, I'll figure out how to have a link in the description to an example of the wellness wheel. But a wellness wheel is an activity that I actually recently presented on. It covers the 8 dimensions of wellness. So those are emotional, environmental, financial, intellectual, physical, social, spiritual, and vocational. So all of these dimensions of wellness, um, there's a wellness wheel, and then each section of the wheel is attributed to one dimension of wellness. I really like this activity, and it's really helpful because you can, every dimension is out of 100%. So, right now, my example, my vocational wellness is at 80% out of 100, which is great. Um, but my physical wellness is only at a 30%, and that's because the gym has not been open and I miss it. Um, and I've just been so exhausted. I've really, even now, without going over it in detail with myself, I can tell you why some things are low, why some things are high. And then all of these 8 dimensions form a wheel. And my wheel looks pretty janky right now. It's not even at all. It's very bumpy. So if I had a car with wheels that look like this, I would not get anywhere. But it's okay. Parts of the wheel are good. But now doing this activity has really helped me focus on things that maybe I actually knew were not great, but I was pretending they were fine. This wheel is really just showing me, like, this is my reality right now. I would like to fix that. So hopefully we'll be able to put a link in the description so you can see what I'm talking about. It's like a self-audit. Someone described that to me lately. It's a self-audit. I really like that.
I do like that as well. I think like all those little things really add up too. It's interesting, like when you think of yourself in holistic terms. Um, I know when I'm stressed, sometimes my mind goes to like, oh, everything is wrong, everything is failing, everything is awful. And obviously, it's not everything. I think having like a visual like that where you can see, all right, this is really what's stressing me out. It's only in this category or it's a couple categories. It feels way less overwhelming at that point. And it's those little things that we can do just to keep up with those or to make them a little bit easier for ourselves to make up for that. Yeah, that's great. So since we're talking about lots of graphs and charts, we'll end up with a whole manual here. um, One thing I would recommend that I found really helpful as a counselor who went to counseling, this is one thing that I did in a session, of a pie chart of the time I spent doing all of my things, right? So like the amount of time I spend at work doing work stuff, the amount of time I spend outside of my work hours doing work, the amount of time spending doing self-care or doing activities with people, having some connection, support, taking care of myself, resting, sleeping, eating, all of the things. When you break it down and see how much time goes where, you can make different choices about how you spend your time. And that can be very simple. Like I found it really helpful to really write down the actual number of hours that I spend doing my job. Because when I see the number, I can do something with that. But when I feel like it's too flexible, it's not really structured, it's a lot easier for me to say like, well, it's only an extra half hour, so I'll do it here. I think holding yourself to some accountability with that can be really empowering. You actually see your boundaries there. Um, And then I know in small spaces, like maybe your dorm room, having a space might not be entirely your own. Are there ways that you can designate certain areas for certain things? So my desk with my computer is where I do my work. My bed is where I relax and rest and use. So are you able to set those kind of boundaries to help your brain to categorize those spaces? Because sometimes if you're doing everything in your bed, it's going to be a lot harder to go to sleep because your brain is
Mhm.
like, oh, this is where I work. But no, this is not where you work. This
Yeah,
is where
this
you
is where
rest.
I sleep. Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So I guess on to the next part of this. We have some do's and do nots. Um, First off, do take time for yourself. You have to have your basic needs met to make sure that you're doing okay to do things. Um, do not relax to the point of procrastinating. Sometimes we relax to avoid, right? And then it's not helpful anymore. There's a difference between resting to recharge and come back to the things that we need to accomplish and do. But there's also resting to the point of, well, I'm not going to deal with that. Which oftentimes increases our stress. So it is a tough balance. But I think internally we know when we're overdoing anything. And those are good, important moments to check in with yourself and say, yeah, it's probably not helpful for me to sleep another 3 hours right now. Like there's some things that would make me feel better to just get done. Do you find ways to motivate yourself and make it fun? I know this can be challenging in different ways and different things, but I've found that having something that's doable between my responsibilities, so whether that's like the taking deep breaths that we talked about before, something that I can look forward to as a relaxation, or just something entertaining. I hated exercise for a long time, and then Pokemon Go came out, and that reward system super motivated me. So I will always be able to get myself motivated if there's something kind of attached to it. Um, and obviously, it doesn't define who I am or give me anything tangible other than fulfillment. I think it's fun to just have those kind of systems in place for yourself. And then do know your warning signs of being overwhelmed and stressed. Be familiar with those. When I get overwhelmed and stressed, my jaw hurts because I'm clenching my jaw. I get headaches. Um, I feel drained and exhausted about everything. Those are my warning signs. If I know them, I can make small adjustments to make sure that I'm taking care of myself during those times. Do not ignore those. Very easy to do. It's very easy to say, yeah, I have a headache, but I have to study. Okay, well, you're avoiding something that your body's telling you,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
that
last
doesn't
night
help.
I was studying for my exam and I just felt my eyes start to close and they just kept going and I was like, "All right, I need to go to sleep now." It was pretty early for me. It was like probably 10 o'clock, but I was just ready to zonk out and I did.
Nice. So you listened to your body there and we're like, going with it. I'm not going to force
Mhm.
myself to this. I remember college me would it be like, drink a cup of coffee and keep going. That probably wouldn't be helpful.
Nope. Don't do that. Do let go of perfectionism. It delays the process and increases your stress. Like I mentioned before, I'm really interested in all the very tiny little bitty details. And sometimes that distracts me from the actual work that I'm supposed to be doing. So do not entertain negative self talk as you work. You showed up, you're giving your best effort, and that is all you can do. Something that I've done, actually, thanks to Kyle, I did a little externalization activity over the course of a semester, and I externalized my negativity and my self critic. So now I have a relationship with my self critic that's more familiar than it was before. Before, my self critic just felt kind of like a dictator. And he was like, you need to do this and you're not doing good enough and blah blah blah, angry blah. And he was just really mean and he kept telling me what to do. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm doing a good job and I'm here. So shut up and let me do my work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so tell your self critic who's boss. It's you. And do, please, do ask for help. Your professors are there to teach you and they hold office hours for a reason. It's their job to help you when you need it. You need an extension? Ask for it. If you need clarification on some material, ask. There is no harm in asking, especially when you ask sooner rather than later. So that's why it's really important to be on top of your warning signs, on top of just things in general. If you notice that you're slipping or you're struggling early on, definitely voice that concern. And then the worst thing that happens is that you ask for an extension that you don't actually need.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I can speak to that as a teacher because it's very rare when people ask for those things, even though I know that they probably need them. So don't hesitate, especially if your teacher is understanding and like a kind person who will understand. Like we all go through things. Sometimes we just need a little bit more time to complete something. So give them the chance to be helpful for you as well. So, in wrapping up, since we have quotes, quotes are fun. Mine for the week is an Audre Lorde quote, and she wrote, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Taking care of yourself is so important." This is me now. I ended the quote at warfare. But taking care of yourself is the preservation, and sometimes it goes against like our society's ambition and drive, but it is the thing that will keep us sustained, and that is really powerful, especially as everything around us is shifting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There you go, Kyle. Take credit where credit is due. My quote is from a video that I'll put in the description. I did a presentation about work-life balance earlier this week. I don't know why I'm saying earlier this week. It's Tuesday that we're recording this, so it was on Sunday. And there's a quote from the video that I loved. It's quote, "We have chosen breadth and variety over total focus and narrow perfection, and that's a very wise choice." End quote.
Nice.
It's awesome. I love that quote. I don't know why. I just never thought of it that way. See the link in the description to watch that video. It's about 3 minutes long, a little bit longer, maybe 3 and some change. It's really interesting. And we've chosen breadth and variety, which is perfect because if we chose total focus and narrow perfection, then we would only be good at one thing. And what's the use in that? What's the joy in that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, because we are complicated and there are so many things in the world. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I agree. Well, if you liked this, and we've been encouraging people to submit some artwork and share what they're doing to self-care during this time, you can send that to our email. We'll be happy to take a look and talk about them or share them in different ways. So feel free to send us what you're working on, what's getting you through. Some of this might be even your description for what work-life balance is for you. We would love to hear what you're doing to make that happen. Um, so yeah, send us messages.
Yeah. And next time, not next week, but next time, we are going to have an episode for you about relationships.
Mm.
Relationships. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you.